Laura Patterson with VisionEdge Marketing, and I'm going to be addressing the topic of using big data to support marketing performance management. We appreciate all of you that are listening in, and we realize that it's a large audience with a broad range of experience in this topic. So I'm going to try to make sure that I cover things in a way that will be able to address this diversity of experience. Many of you are probably challenged today by data and by performance management. They are both very important topics that marketers are tackling. And I really appreciate the fact that all of you are trying to figure out the best way to move your efforts forward. It's the amount of data that we are all trying to manage is becoming mind-boggling. I mean, we are drowning in data. Every day, there are more than 1 billion posts and 3.2 billion likes and comments posted to Facebook and 175 million tweets on Twitter. I pulled this stat just a few weeks ago, so odds are those numbers have already gone up. In fact, Stephanie Miller, VP of Member Relations at the Direct Marketing Association, said very recently that data is big, getting bigger, and more complex and expensive to manage. I'm sure all of us know that, are experiencing that on a daily basis. And so the real question is, what do we do about it? And I'm here to share with you some ways that we can go about addressing that. Just very, very quickly, VisionEdge Marketing is a 14-year-old firm headquartered in Austin, Texas, and we began as a data analytics process and measurement organization. We've had the privilege to work with many customers, some of them you're probably familiar with, and I'm going to be sharing the experience of those customers in the world of data and analytics, as well as our own experience. I began my career in the late 70s. Most of us in the organization have similar backgrounds. And when we began our careers, the amount of data that we had available to us was much more limited. And that presented a different set of challenges than what we are experiencing today with the explosion of data. So today, by having so much, it's really sometimes difficult to figure out what's the parts that are relevant, that are important, and that we need to actually do something with, and how to separate that out from the rest. It is very important, though, that we don't give up. For those of us who do feel like we're just drowning in a sea of data and it's easier just to move on, that's probably the wrong thing to do. A study done by the Economic Intelligence Unit just at the end of last year found a very interesting piece of information about the difference between organizations that are cracking the code around data versus those that aren't. And so they found that firms that emphasize decision-making based on data and analytics perform 5 to 6% better than firms that rely on intuition and experience. So I think that's something that all of us would benefit from, is how do we get that little extra competitive edge in what is an extremely dynamic, competitive environment. And this is one way to do it, through data. I want to be sure that we cover 4 topics while we're together. There's a lot of noise around big data. In fact, you can't hardly go a day without something on the subject of big data. So I want to be sure we touch on that. And then which data sets are important? How do we separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak? And of course, data by itself isn't what's important. What's important is how we use that data. How do we turn that data into insights? So I want to make sure we cover that topic. And then lastly, how to convert what we glean from the data into a business story. How do we use it to make better decisions? And I hope a case study I have will be useful for that purpose. Okay, so let's start. Let's kind of be sure we are all on the same page about structured and unstructured data. We need both of them. They're both very important to the work that we want to be able to do and the decisions that we want to be able to make. Structured data is a lot of the data that we have housed in our systems that can be in rows and columns that we're used to applying analytics and modeling to. And it's the stuff that we're typically used to working with, and it's pretty well formed. It's the unstructured data, the stuff that's more squishy, harder to kind of really categorize. It's not easy to put into buckets. That is our biggest challenge today. And that's where the volume is going. And this is what we refer to as big data, this unstructured data. this volume of data that we get from the non-traditional sources. So most of us are either blogging or using blog information. All of us are in some way or another doing social media, whether that's LinkedIn or Facebook or other networks, tweeting, all of the stuff we're doing by way of email, sensors, photographs, video, any kind of images, all of that is unstructured data, and all of that falls into big data. The real challenge we all face is how do we unlock the value of this data? So if we go back to that study by the Economist Intelligence Unit, they did a survey. That study was a survey of 600 executives. And they found that 85% of the study participants indicated that their biggest hurdle to unlocking the value from the data isn't the volume. That in itself is a big challenge, but it's actually the analysis of that data and then acting on it. So capturing it, storing it, people are figuring that out. But what to do in terms of analyzing it and acting on it, that's where we have to have and invest our energy and our resources. So if you're thinking about where to prioritize things, it isn't about getting more. It's definitely about analyzing and acting on what you have. Because you can always have more data. There's never been any organization I've been associated with, and I've been predominantly in technology and financial services and life science, healthcare kinds of organizations, all very data-oriented, data-driven, and there never seem to be enough data. You always want more. So it isn't a question of more. It's really a question of getting the right data and acting on it, and analyzing it properly and acting on it properly. When we work with data and we work with our customers, we really feel that there are 6 key important data sets that we want to be sure to tap. These are business activity data, which is that mostly structured data that we house in our ERP systems, potentially in our CRM systems, our data warehouses, most of all of that data. Our social media comments and reviews, all that unstructured data, all the stuff that's happening out there in the communities that we're monitoring. Then the transactional data that's occurring between us and our customers. And then website data, all the things that are happening on our website. That in turn, that includes the traffic and the opens and the pages and the downloading activity, all of those kinds of things. The 5th key area is our call center telecom data, or anything that has to do with customer service and support, however you're doing that, including the chats. And then lastly, images and graphics, videos that you might be having, or pictures that might be going on, or your infographics, all of those. Bernard Marr, who is with the Advanced Performance Institute, says, to get the most out of data, you need to know what you want to know. I think this is a very important starting point for our session today. Because there is so much data available to us, it would be easy to get lost in it. It's, like haystacks and haystacks and haystacks of information. So in order for that to be useful, you kind of have to start with the scientific method with an hypothesis, or what it is you want to know. And then framing it with what it is you want to know will help you figure out the best way to approach the data, not only in terms of what data you need to have, but also how you're going to analyze it. As I mentioned at the start, the data in itself, while that's a great thing to have, it's just a raw asset. It's not helpful until you can actually see things in it that you can make useful. So the purpose of your analytics is to be able to look for patterns. A study that was done by PricewaterhouseCoopers, again, it's either the end of last year or earlier this year, which was their digital IQ survey, said that 58% of the respondents in that survey agree that moving from data to insight is the major challenge. And that is very similar to the study we just quoted earlier about the biggest challenge not being the volume, but being the analysis and acting on it. So same key issue. How do we take this data and how do we do something with it that will enable us to make better decisions about our markets, about our customers, our competitors, our products. And we don't have to look too far back for some guidance. There was a gentleman, Stephen Tuthill, in 1990, who worked for 3M, who built a data hierarchy model. And many of you may not be familiar with this model, but it is still very, very relevant to the work we're doing today. And of course, 1990 was long before we had the kind of big data we have today. But he basically said that there is a pyramid that we can work from. And that pyramid starts at the bottom level, which is our data. And the key thing that we need to do with data is have a way to capture it and store it. All right, so that's something that we've all been trying to figure out the best way to do. But then, once we have that, you can't really do anything with it until you arrange it, select it, and you produce information from it. And once you have the information, you can then begin to do the analysis, synthesis, a kind of work, and assimilation that gives you knowledge. And once you have the knowledge, that's where you can derive interpretations, evaluation, and achieve wisdom. So think of it as, whether you want to think of it as a pyramid or a process, that's what's really important. And so when you're looking at what you are doing, you can kind of say, where are we? Are we still kind of, in the quagmire of data, trying to figure out how to capture and store it? Or are we at that point where what we really need to be thinking about is how to turn that data into information, arrange it, or have we got that kind of, they have the information, and what the key thing is now is the synthesis and analysis that will get us knowledge? Or have we already surpassed that, and are we at the wisdom stage? Everybody in the room, or everybody listening is probably at different stages. Synthesis, though, is where we begin to see the patterns. That's the key place that you want to get to on the journey. And so if you're not there yet, that's the plan of action you want to create, is how do we get there? And the thing to remember about patterns is sometimes you can see really cool, interesting patterns, but they may not be relevant. Remember what Bernard Mars said. You need to know what you want to know. So you want to take the time to review and discuss each of the patterns that will come to light and the potential implications. We really recommend that you work in a team as you go through the synthesis process, and once you see those patterns, to post them in some fashion, whether that's on a whiteboard or on flip charts, and then have a conversation about potential implications and talk about why you think each of those patterns is important and what it means.
Call from Troy Thompson.
This is Laura. Yes. Yes, I'll be there. Thanks. Have a great holiday. Synthesis is where we begin to see the patterns. That's the place we all want to get to. So as you're putting together your roadmap, you want to be thinking about how to get to this place on your journey. Because it's at synthesis that when we begin to see the patterns that we can begin to develop those insights. Now, not all the patterns that we are going to see are going to be relevant. They're not all going to be germane. So we recommend that you take the time to capture these patterns, whether that's on a whiteboard or on flip charts, and then discuss as a group, a working group, the potential implications, and talk about why you think each pattern is important and what it means. And then for each one of those patterns that you think is important, in one simple statement, articulate the insight that emerged. Track each insight and sort of see what the big picture is that may be emerging, as you go. Once you have this simple statement, incubate the insights. Give yourself and your team at least a day to walk away from what we call the board, and let's simmer on the stove, so to speak. Then come back and ask yourself, do the insights resonate? The point of this step is to decide if the insights resonate and are compelling enough to make or affect key decisions. I can't talk now, honey. I have to call you back. Damn. So once you have an understanding of this pyramid, the place that you want to get to is how do you transform data into insights? And that begins with synthesis. So as you're thinking about where you are, you want to have a plan of action for how do you get to the place where you can begin to see patterns. Now, not all patterns are germane. So you want to take the time to review the patterns that come to light, and then in a working group, kind of discuss each pattern and its potential implications, and talk about why you think each of those patterns is important and what it might mean for your organization. Once you've kind of had that conversation, step back and try to craft a single, simple statement, one statement that articulates the insight that's emerged from this pattern. What is the thing that you are getting from it? And then you want to track that each insight and sort of see how that big picture is and how it's going to be emerging as you go on in time. But once you've got this sort of simple statement, set it aside, give yourself some time to let that insight incubate. We recommend at least taking a day away from what we call the board, whether that's that whiteboard or those flip charts, and then coming back together and having another conversation about, do the insights resonate? Which ones resonate more than the others? Because what you're trying to figure out is whether or not what you have in this pattern and in this insight is compelling enough to affect a key decision. And then, if the answer is yes, decide on what the action is to be that you're going to take. So remember, the biggest challenge people are facing today when it comes to data is this ability to analyze, synthesize, and act. So if you can move yourself forward with a process, and this is one way to do that, then the key thing is to make a decision about what action you are going to take. So I want to kind of share maybe a case study that would be helpful. This is a financial services organization. It's a very large organization that serves a particular regional community, and they had a number of specific questions they wanted to ask. They're very successful. They've got a great reputation with their customers, and the key thing they wanted to do was explore how to accelerate their growth and achieve more growth by acquiring new customers. So the first questions they started to ask, so remember back to Bernard Marr, is know what it is you want to know. So the first question is, who is most likely to purchase from us? And the second question they wanted to know is, what are they most likely to purchase? And then, where are they? So there were three key things they wanted to know. Who to purchase, where they are, and what they will purchase. Those are pretty common questions any organization might ask about their business, especially in terms of acquiring new customers. So by looking at both structured and unstructured data, they were able to identify within their customer set those customers in three particular clusters or segments who are most likely to purchase. So they went into their data, they used both structured and unstructured data, and they used both research that they had conducted and voice of customer research, other types of customer satisfaction, loyalty research, customer service data they had collected, which is all part of big data. Things that were happening on their website, so all different ways, the kinds of data that they used, and they identified this particular set. So they organized their customers into sets, A, B, C, D types of customers. They then also looked at all of their customer base and segmented them into key categories. And then they looked for the relationship between those A, B, Cs, and Ds and those categories or segments in order to see who was most likely to purchase. That's sort of the analysis they did. And they identified this one group and these 3 stages. So then they took a look at the market that they're in. Remember, they're a regional market. They took a look at the market that they're in, and they said, where are there other people like these B customers in these 3 kinds of segments in the communities that we can access? And so they found 3 communities in their region that had a large enough population of prospective buyers that most resembled this B group and these 3 customer segments. And so they call those the midlife, high life group, the bargain lovers group, and the family fortunes group. That's their segments. And so by doing research in their data, they said, well, what is it that those groups, those segments, typically prefer to buy and why? And so they were able, based again on looking at their data, both structured and unstructured data, identify a particular product that was going to be most, have the highest predisposition to purchase. And, building out some models and doing some other things, they were able to say, okay, we have a high predisposition to purchase for this product against these segments, against this particular customer set. And that's what they went off and did, and it has been very successful for them. So again, maybe this case study will help you understand how you might approach the questions, same types of questions, and how you might approach your data and think through the process of identifying those opportunities. So you want to be able to convert your findings into a business story, and that takes a particular type of software and known as data visualization. That's, a picture tells 1,000 words, so to speak. And that's what you want to be able to do with your data, is make that picture. So data visualization presents analytical results in a visual way that helps you really see what's relevant among the various variables. It captures and communicates important patterns and even supports predictive models. And if you have a strong enough capability in data visualization, you can really use it to expose trends and patterns that you might not have otherwise been able to notice using other means of analysis. So really highly encourage you to explore data visualization and all the different ways you can do that. And there are a variety of software packages and capabilities that are available today. So let's explore what you can do after this session to move the needle. Some very simple things that you can begin to do. So first things first, managing data starts with knowing what data you have and understanding the format that you need it to be in. You may be amazed at what data is available or maybe what data isn't available. So the very first thing, if you don't have an understanding of the data that's accessible to marketing, that's the first place to start. Create a data inventory for marketing. What are all your market, customer, competitive, business, program, product data? What is it? Where is it? Where is it currently captured? What systems are they in? How frequently is that data updated and who updates it? Who in marketing has access or should have access? And then what data do you wish you had that's not on the list and why it's important? What business questions will that information help you answer that you can't answer today? And then prioritize your data wish list. So that's a very interesting, great place to start. If you've already done that, go back to the data hierarchy and say, okay, we've got the data. We've got it captured and stored. So what we need to do is have a plan for moving further up on that hierarchy. So figure out where you are. Are you at the data stage, the information stage? Are you at the knowledge stage or the wisdom stage? And if you're not at a stage where you want to be, how are you going to get there? So maybe that's another place to begin is, where are you on that data hierarchy? If you're at the bottom, then focus here on creating a data inventory. So it's time to wrap up. I want to leave you with a few key ideas. Remember that you need to know what you want to know. Otherwise, you might find yourself lost among the data. You want to collect, organize, analyze, synthesize. That's back to understanding where you are in your own journey. Are you at the collection stage, or are you moved beyond that and you're in the organize stage? A lot of organizations get sort of stuck at the collection and organize stage. They think they just need to get more and more and more. So I want to encourage you to perhaps think that you might have much more than you may even need, and that more is not necessarily better. It's the analyze stage that you need to get to, although we have all heard the statement paralysis analysis, or I think it's analysis paralysis. The whole point being that we can get to a place where we're continuing to analyze the data but not taking any action from it. So you have to synthesize it and look for those actionable patterns. You want to be able to move from the state of managing your data to acting on your data. And once you have an understanding of the actionable patterns, you've done that synthesis, incubate your insights. Take a moment to incubate your insights. Take a day, put them in single statements, understand what those implications are, come back, figure out which ones are most relevant, what impact they're going to have on your business, and then develop a plan of action. Remember at the very start of this session, we talked about the biggest challenge for most organizations when it comes to big data and improving performance is taking action. So have a clear plan of action and then implement. Thank you for joining us. You can learn more at the onlinemarketinginstitute.org. If you have any questions or you're curious, please feel free to visit us at VisionEdgeMarketing.com.